Well, hello. Welcome.
Hi,
Here
everybody.
we are Friday. And as we said in our emails and our notifications, we are here to once and for all rectify the reputation of a really important instrument in the Western world. And so to do that, we have invited a very special guest who is not only a practitioner but a defender of the reputation of this instrument. So please, everyone, welcome our dear friend Daniel Bruner.
Hey, Dan.
Hey,
How are you
How are you?
in these
good.
in
How
these
are you
times?
guys?
You know, we're doing well.
Good.
It's been a long time since we've seen you. We're so glad to see you
I
tonight.
know.
And I know lives are keeping us all really, really busy. And then certainly with everything going on, it's
It's crazy, isn't it?
it
It
is.
is crazy, but
This
it
keeps
is
getting crazier.
Yeah.
and having people like yourself be with us via this medium really makes it a little easier. And but here's the thing, Daniel. All of our friends and families have been sending guesses about what instrument are we trying to rectify here. We have received
Tuba.
bagpipes.
Kazoo, maybe.
Yes,
Kazoo. My cousin
kazoo.
would play the kazoo.
And
Yep.
the triangle. I don't know if that's an instrument really, but
Sure
so I think we need to put everyone at ease and let them know which instrument we're trying to bring to raise the level of dignity here.
Well, I'm here, I guess, to talk about the recorder, and actually not just a recorder. What a lot of people probably don't realize if they think of the recorder is that little small plastic thing that's very shrill that kids in a lot of school systems start out with before they move to another instrument. There are actually a range of recorders of different sizes and pitches, all the way from very small and very high to large and low. And I was going to just sample several of those for people and do that by playing several different pieces from the Middle Ages and then up into the 17th century, which was kind of the 16th, 17th, and early 18th centuries were the heyday of the recorder. It in Europe dates back to, I think, the earliest ones that have been found have been from the 14th century, but it really was widely played in the 15th century, the 16th century, 17th, up through, I'd say, the time of Bach, which is kind of mid 18th century.
And so then, kind of the jazz of the Middle Ages.
Right. And then what happened was towards the end of the 18th century, music in the Western world went through a lot of transformations, and the size of musical groups increased. From small ensembles to, orchestras, the sort of thing we're more used to. And also composers started writing music that was more emotional, more sort of over-the-top emotional, more chromatic. It involved lots of development with lots of sharps and flats. And a much bigger sound. And so the instruments changed in order to accommodate that. And the recorder kind of fell out of use pretty much by the late 18th century and was really revived in the early to mid 20th century. as part of a revived interest in early music, in music of the Middle Ages and the Renaissance and the Baroque.
And
So,
Dan,
yeah.
how did you get interested in the recorder? When did you start playing?
Well, I started really about 9 or so years ago. And, my story is when I was a kid, when I was in junior high, high school, and then college, I played the flute, just, the modern flute. Never, always just as an amateur. I was never a music major. And then when I went to law school and started a career, I stopped playing really any music. But I always loved early music, like music of the Renaissance especially. And a few years back, just decided that it was time to do something about it. And, one advantage to picking up the recorder is there are a lot of people in the area who play as well, play the instruments. And so it's easier to find groups to play with as opposed to picking, say, if I picked up the modern flute again, that's harder to find people to play with unless, I play in like an orchestra or something.
Mm-hmm.
So
and you mentioned the modern flute. So was the recorder the original flute?
Well, recorders were one difference is the recorder, of course, is played this way, whereas the flute, the transverse flute, is played this way. So what's now the modern flute actually has its own ancestors. This is one of them here. This is a Baroque flute. And so this is more the ancestor of the modern flute, but it's similar to the recorder in some ways in that there are almost no keys. Everything is just an open hole that you close with your fingers. But like the modern flute, it's blown this way as opposed to the recorder. So anyhow, for recorders, like I said, there's a range of sizes all the way from the soprano, which is, this is the soprano here. It probably looks a little different from the soprano recorders that kids play in school now, because this is modeled more on an instrument the way it would have looked and played in, I'd say, the late 16th, early 17th century. But they go from this all the way to a bass recorder.
Oh, my goodness.
Much larger. And then there's a contrabass, a great bass recorder, which I'll just briefly play something on, but that's this.
Wow, I've never seen that.
That's a first for me.
Wow, that's amazing. Cool. Well, should we hear something?
Yeah,
yes,
what I thought I would do just to give you a sense of the range is just briefly start with this is a very short piece. It's actually a hymn. It's a Dutch version of the Pater Noster, the Lord's Prayer, basically. And so just to give you a sense of how different the instruments are, it's a very short piece. I'll play it on the soprano recorder and then play the same piece on the bass and on the great bass so that you can get that sense.
Sounds wonderful.
And then this is the great bass.
That's beautiful.
It's quite amazing. I tell you, Daniel, I know you have an affinity for Japanese culture and Eastern philosophy, and somehow that type of sound truly reminded me of that.
Yeah, there is a Japanese kind of in-blown flute called the shakuhachi that I have tried to play, but the way that the embouchure is structured, it's extremely difficult to play. At least it was for me. People typically work for months and months on it before they can get any sound out of the instrument at all. So,
well, these look like it took some air.
well, yeah, especially the bigger ones take a lot of air, and it's interesting that on the one hand, the recorder has a reputation as being very easy, a very easy and simple instrument. So kids start out on it, before they go to a different one. But because of the way it's built, the instrument has almost no resistance at all when you blow into it. Unlike if you think, for instance, of a brass instrument that has a mouthpiece, there's a lot that when you blow into it, you're working against in order to create the sound. And something like a clarinet or a saxophone or an oboe has a reed, or in the case of like an oboe or bassoon, a double reed. So that produces a lot of resistance, whereas the recorder has almost no resistance at all, which means it's extremely sensitive to actually the way that you blow and the way that you articulate. So it's pretty easy to play badly. And, it's harder to play well. And, I'm somewhere on that spectrum, much closer to playing it badly than
Oh my gosh, that sounded beautiful.
But it's
it sounds amazing. I have to say, I did a little bit of reading because I truly was equally misinformed as the majority of the people who don't know the recorder like you do and real musicians do. And it's quite interesting to know of an instrument that has survived all these centuries and is still meaningful and purposeful as this one is.
Yeah.
So, and are there current people who are famous for virtuosos of the recorder?
Yeah, there are. It started to really be revived in, I don't know, probably like the 50s or something in Europe, in Germany and in the Netherlands. And one of the first really famous 20th century virtuosos was a Dutch guy named Frans Bruggen. and he really did a lot to make the recorder, a respectable instrument again. There are a lot of his old performances that are available on YouTube, just like everything is on YouTube, but he's really worth checking out because he's amazing. And now there are a lot of really prominent recorder players. It's particularly popular in the Netherlands and Germany and some other European countries. And they're actually people who, modern composers who are
just going to ask that
for it again. And some of it, there, of course, a lot of it is avant-garde composers who are interested in exploring, all the, the full range of the instruments. So what happens when you talk into it at the same time that you're playing, or, overblow or underblow, or turn it on its side and blow, all this crazy stuff.
That you do every day, right?
There are composers who are working on it now. Although I'd say that the majority of the folks like me who play, for the most part, we play, I'd say, medieval, Renaissance, up, through the Baroque era.
And you mentioned there's a lot of people in the area that are aficionados of the recorder. So are these formal groups that are getting together, or just casual, or is there some kind of a society?
There's a Washington Recorder Society that I've been a member of for a few years, and actually I'm president of it now.
So we're talking to the right person.
Of course, like everybody else, all of our plans kind of came to a screeching halt in March. And so we haven't had meetings in person since then. And of course, most music groups haven't either. And so there are a lot of professionals who are trying to figure out like virtual ways for people to get together and play and so on.
Yeah.
One of you guys probably know more about this because you've been doing this this with all these great musicians who are much better than me. But trying to do duets or trios over the internet is extremely difficult because of the delay in the in the sound. And so, like, say, my teacher who lives in Boston, when she does duets or trios with people, she'll play, like, go on Zoom and play one part and mute you, and then you listen to her and play the other part. So you get to hear both parts, but she doesn't. She can't hear what you're doing.
Well, your other half being in computer sciences, he maybe he can get his colleagues. I'm sure the recording folks and the computer folks are really working on this.
They might
figure this out.
I mean, it seems like this would really be the occasion to stimulate breakthrough.
Yeah,
that's right.
Until we can be together.
I'm
right?
sure that this is already underway. Now, Daniel, being a person who really embraces Eastern philosophy, do you see a connection between meditation and playing music?
Well, I would say that, as I said, because just the way it's built and the fact that the recorder doesn't offer much resistance to your blowing. So what you put into it is what comes out of it, pretty much. So it can be very sensitive to your state of mind. How calm you're, if I'm feeling nervous or jittery or whatever, it will definitely come out in the playing. So yeah, I do think that being aware of any sort of technique, whether it's meditation or the Alexander technique or something else that makes you more conscious of, number one, helps you relax, but also makes you more conscious of, am I clenching my jaw? You know, is my throat tight or is it open in the back? What's happening with my tongue? What's happening, or my fingers gripping the instrument? All of these things help.
I would think also the fact that you're so focused on the music. It's truly in the present moment when you're creating music. You really don't have much room to be thinking about other things and having all those discursive thoughts go through, and you're just really there in the moment. I could hear that with you playing.
Well, and then I certainly find that if my mind does wander, or I start thinking too much about, oh no, that difficult passage is coming up that I always have trouble with, then it generally doesn't work. You know, that becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. You know,
that's right. And how do the cats like? How do the cats like the playing?
They don't. It's funny. They will be more sensitive to different frequencies, but it's hard to tell because I don't know what they hear, of course. And I know one of them, when I play the alto recorder, which is sort of mid-range, he would come downstairs and, you know, seem to be interested. When I started to play the really high one, then he would leave the room. And when I played the low ones, he just lost interest.
Very discerning.
That's nothing. That is, you know.
Oh my gosh.
That's well, you know, I do think that there is it's a line through all human beings, all beings. Music is just part of the fabric, and it's what makes us reflect and connect and create. So what do you think is the role that musicians, aficionados, people who have a desire to remain connected, what is the role of music to help us get to the other side of this crisis?
Boy, that's I mean, you know, I'd like to think that it helps. It certainly helps, I think, people individually. It helps them. Whether, I mean, you know, we're in such a time of upheaval right now, and especially everything going on as it's starting to dawn on people like me, you know, how racist our society is and what my role in all of that is. And it's hard to figure out, especially while we're still all virtual, you know, how much the music can help with all of that. But I do think there's an increasing interest in exploring kind of all the, you know, composers who might otherwise have been forgotten or have been forgotten until now. Women composers, you know, there are actually a couple of very interesting contemporary Black composers who are writing stuff for the recorder, which is really interesting.
Dan, would you give us that information? We'll post it on the on
Sure.
This.
Yeah,
Beautiful.
definitely. But I thought what I would do, just to give you a little, there are a couple of really short pieces, but going a couple of pieces that are actually renditions of troubadour songs, which are from the 12th century, from, you know, the south of France, from the, you know, Occitan region. One is by a very famous in that world composer, Bernard de Ventadorn, who was a 12th century composer, who was one of these troubadours who popularized this notion of spiritual love. And what the troubadours were trying to do was they were modeling their music on Gregorian chant, which, at the time was the art music, or, the meaningful, quote unquote, music in Europe, in medieval Europe. And so they tried to model their music on Gregorian chant, but made it all secular. So they would take, for instance, hymns to the Virgin and turn them into a song to the beautiful woman that I love, who totally ignores me and doesn't, return my love or my feelings at all, but I love her anyway. So a lot of the music is like this piece is, the lyrics are basically, when I see the lark swoop and fly up and down, just out of the sheer joy of being alive, it makes me feel even worse than ever because my woman won't give me the time of day. And,
oh my gosh! Well, take it away.
Wonderful.
So that, of course, when it's sung, it goes on for quite a while because there are a lot of verses to it in which he, really elaborates on how miserable he is. But, and then an interesting one from about the same time is the only music that we know of that survived from this period that was written by a woman troubadour. I think they were called trouborites. And a number of poems of women troubadours have survived, but only one of them has the original music attached to it.
Wow.
So this was the Contessa del Dia from the south of France. And again, the lyrics are very much, I'm obliged to sing of that which I would not. So bitter am I over the one who I love, for I love him more than anything, but with him mercy and courtliness are of no avail. Not my beauty, not my merit, nor my good sense, for I'm deceived and betrayed exactly as I would be if I were ungracious.
Oh my goodness. It sounds like a Facebook post.
And this is before I was playing on a tenor recorder. This is an alto. Oh, sorry.
Bravo.
That was wonderful.
And then the last thing I thought I would do, which is a little longer but still short, jumping ahead a number of centuries to the 17th century. In the Netherlands, there was a guy, Jacob van Eyck, and he lived in some town in the Netherlands in the 1600s. He was blind, and he was primarily a carillon player, the bells in the Dutch churches. But he also played the recorder, and he was paid by the town fathers to wander through the town and through the parks and just improvise on his instrument. And then somebody fortunately worked with him and wrote out everything that he had come up with. And it's actually the largest. It's called Der Flutenlusthof, the Flutist Pleasure Garden. And it's the largest collection of music written for any wind instrument, I think, up till the present. It's literally hundreds of pieces. But what he does is he will start with a popular tune of the time, either just a popular song or a hymn that everyone knew, and play the actual, the bare song, and then play variations on it that get more and more kind of elaborate and complicated. And some are so advanced that only the very most advanced recorder players can play them. But this one is shorter and much easier. So I'll play the basic tune, and then there are two variations on it.
Great.
great.
Bravo.
Those were
That's-
really intricate variations.
And Daniel, my cousin Doris up in Pennsylvania is a musician, and she has a question for you here.
Oh,
She
okay.
she was wondering, as you change from the bass to tenor to soprano recorders, are you still playing from the same music clef with the instrument merely sounding a different voice, or do the clefs change?
The for the bass recorder, it's in bass clef. The other recorders are in treble clef. Although they're different, the fingerings are different. They're either, some of them are in C and some of them are in F. But when you get to bass, the bass recorder, then you're in bass clef
Yeah.
at that point.
That's wonderful.
Oh my gosh! Well, I imagine this was the popular music of the day, right? So on a Friday night, people were out enjoying this music, and it's been not only just a lovely reunion with a dear friend that we haven't seen in a long time, but just to have you share that with us is such a treat, especially in this time, Dan.
Yeah, well, thank you. I mean, what you guys are doing is terrific. And you've got, much greater. When Jose approached me about this, I looked at several of your previous broadcasts and thought, oh my God, these are actually good musicians.
Hey, Daniel, I guarantee you, you're the best recording player of all that bunch. So I can guarantee that. How's
That's
that?
right.
Okay, well, there
Right.
you go.
Well, we are so excited to have connected with you again and to share with the rest of our friends the beauty and the intricacy that comes with the recorder. And we will forever think of it in a much different way. I know I will.
Well, that's good.
Yes.
And we look forward to when we can all be out and together again
Absolutely.
and listen to you play with your ensemble.
Okay.
That's right. Once your husband creates a technology for simultaneous broadcasting.
That's right.
Yeah.
Speaking of, give him a big hug from us, would you?
Will do. Will do.
And
Yeah.
everyone, thank you for tuning in. Stay tuned for the next episode that will come out in a few days. And stay well. We love you all.